People get the government they deserve. A lack of accountability is the norm. Narcissism and arrogance running wild. It's all over social media, blaming anyone but themselves. But who is really at fault for the suffering of modern society? For the multitude of problems. We often forget that a government can't exist without a people to govern. Blaming politicians or corporations for the negative state of society is all you see now on social media. I mean, they definitely have fault, but not the entirety of fault. We forget that we ultimately elected them, that we ultimately buy their products. Maybe there's a psychological reason why we dismiss accountability. It seems that much of what people engage in modern society is to ignore personal flaws and never improve. Essentially, accountability has become a sin. What's more tragic is that trying to hold anyone accountable leads to severe backlash. Let's take a look at the mindset behind the quote, "Every nation gets the government it deserves." Ultimately, it is we that elects governments and agrees with the politician's statements. Many people vote for politicians based on their own selfish gains. Take free handouts. People that rely on government handouts will vote in majority for the politicians that will continue the handouts. Even if the same policies will cripple the nation, they favor immediate selfish gains versus long-term societal progress. I know it sucks to point the finger at us, but we shouldn't even be pointing fingers in the first place. A two-part problem requires both parties to acknowledge the problem. When this fails to happen, you get a negative feedback loop that feeds off each other to produce a much greater catastrophe. What caused the rise in selfishness we see around us? Somewhere down the line, society adopted two beliefs: maximizing pleasure and the ability to engage in something so long as harm is only done to ourselves. But if you think about the logical conclusion of this belief, doesn't it lead to freedom from civic duty, relationship commitments, obligations, accountability, the community, and so forth? So when people vote in selfish ways, this only benefits themselves and not the state of the collective group. We get a mirror reflection of our values. When people stop engaging in civic duties and in community structures, we end up with widespread disunity and deterioration of society. This isn't solely a result of technology or social media. These things are ultimately just tools. Everyone can use them to spread education or enlightenment, but they don't. That's the real truth. They just don't. Who would have thought that the same beliefs that led us to prosperity would come to bite us back? People have one powerful misconception. They assume that a belief system that starts out good and produces good for an extended period of time won't be the thing that ultimately destroys society. The second misconception being that things are never linear in nature. There are peaks and valleys to the chart of societal state and prosperity. It's like the frog in the boiling pot analogy. It goes unnoticed until it's too late. Societal states evolve as a function of time and technological progress, with a system of beliefs being the trajectory defining value. Everything else that follows, like moral change, degeneracy, and so forth, are but subject to the will of our belief systems. So there is some truth in the statement, "We get the government we deserve." Without a body to govern, there is no government. But realistically, there's always two solutions to a social problem. Both produce some effect, and one may be more effective than the other. The real power comes when there is unity. An interesting fact is that therapy increases the rate of change in personality from years to months. But why would people see any need to change when they are being praised for engaging in terrible actions on social media? People refusing to date in Western societies being a glaring result of the increase in this trend due to a lack or desire for personal responsibility or seeing error in their own dating patterns. Yet again, selfishness. Too selfish to care, so they cause pain and suffering unbound to people they come in contact with. When selfishness reigns supreme, people often blame and look to change the world around them. Environmental reaction is largely out of your control, but you can change the way you interact with the environment. Look at dating hypocrisy, which has become a meme these days. On social media, we see people complain about all men or women being bad dating options. Yet, they are the common denominator. They are the one interacting with the dates. Sure, it's not always your fault, but maybe if the same pattern happens at infinity, it might be somewhat. They want the world around them to change towards their dating preferences. Maybe self-reflection might be more effective in this situation versus looking to blame your environment. But environmental blame is easy. It doesn't require work or accepting that you might have made a series of terrible mistakes. All the pieces come together with the statement, "Fear a man with pride, for he makes no mistakes." In reality, he only makes mistakes mistakes, but is too arrogant to see that a mistake has been made. But to be fair, everything can make sense if you don't think about it. I've preached this many times, but focusing on the state of morality is a wasted effort. It's more effective to gauge what system of beliefs led to the change in morality. A religious person has a different moral system than a modern-day degenerate. The flaw in all this was a lack of forward thinking that freedom and engaging in pleasure would ultimately lead to freedom from the chains of traditional morality, freedom from accountability. If anything, people are finding solace in the masses that praise them for blaming politicians or dating partners, when in reality it might be themselves that are the problem. So it becomes a cycle of toxic behaviors that have a negative impact on the people around them. Much of our decision making is based off how we perceive the world in relation to time, in the sense that when we are faced with a problem that takes a lot of work and time to fix, we get fixated and perceive it as far more in magnitude than it actually is. In physics, time is largely considered to be an illusion. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics states that every possible thing that can happen when a choice is presented is happening once the choice is made. In other words, all choices are made at the same time, like a series of parallel universes with everything happening at the same time. It's important to understand that the future is largely determined by the now. The decisions you make now open a new trajectory for future events to happen. Think not of time as a line or an arrow, but a sea of future potential events that it connects to, in a multi-dimensional space by current decisions. Linear interpretations of time, and just as a general form of perception, is a recipe for disaster. Imagine somewhere in the multiverse, there exists a world where everyone decided to embody the change themselves before moving on to blaming others. How would that world differ? It might be a bit better than what we currently see all around us. The end of marriage, dating, corporate appreciation of employees, company loyalty, loyalty to one's community, and so forth. It isn't just a simple we are the victims and they are the perpetrators scenario. We blame corporations, yet we can't live without their products. Maybe it's beneficial at some point to question the market and why the market exists in the first place. The point is that sometimes the answer lies in the question. A wrong line of questioning leads to counterproductive answers. We are living in strange times. Degeneracy is inescapable. Everything wrong with society is out in the open and in your face. But many are calling it progress and don't see the wrong from right. Our pride in taking accountability has largely been eradicated, but maybe wrong and right are a function of time. That maybe this function in time changed the definition and perception of wrong and right. But I do know one thing. When subjective interpretations and objective consequences are not in line, the objective consequences win. If you ask me, I'd rather have freedom from than freedom to.